everybody. This is Dr. Kevin Novak again. And the tank you are looking at was sent to me just this morning. It's a person named Paul. He comes from Canada. The email I just received, it says, "Hello, my name is Paul." He says his last name. I'll leave his last name off. "I would like to thank you for passing what I think is the best filtering system that exists. I have only been in the hobby for 2 years, so I know I have so much to learn about this hobby. I just wanted to send you a note to thank you for putting your filter system on YouTube. I found it one day and was completely taken by it. My initial setup of an aquarium was just plain pea gravel on the bottom of the tank with undergravel filter system. It didn't work well, but it did grow plants over a 2-year period. I went through the initial diatom algae and green hair algae, but what really got me was the blackbeard algae, which I knew was my fault. 2 months ago, I broke the tank down and put in an anoxic filter with a plenum on the bottom of the tank. I used your system. I may have overdid it because I added a layer of fluvostratum mixed with laterite capped with Echo Complete. The substrate is approximately 5 to 5.5 inches deep throughout the tank. The substrate is approximately, he repeats himself there, 5 to 5.5 inches deep throughout the tank, and it appears that I do have good water movement. I am also using 2C Chem Title 110 hang on the back filters because that's what I initially started with, and I plan on getting rid of them at a later date. I know you're busy, but thank you very much for reading my email, and I would just like to thank you again for putting that YouTube video out for everyone to see. I hope a lot more people use it. Thank you." The tank you are seeing, he's from Canada. The email, nice little email. I get a lot of emails. I talk on the phone to a lot of people. Some of the people I talk to on the phone, we've talked about like planet aquariums. One person said, "Why don't I talk more about planet aquariums?" Well, if you set up a plenum and everything else like I have talked about, you can make a nice planet aquarium. You can use that. But I was thinking about it. The guy's right. I do talk. But see, my videos are more about saving fish lives, and plants come secondary, versus planet aquariums are basically plants and very little fish life. They may have shrimp in them. They have, if you look at the videos, you'll see what I mean. And I've talked to several people on the phone. They give me their phone numbers, and we talk on the phone, people all over the country and stuff. And one thing that we kind of all agreed on, that a lot of these planet aquariums are basically water gardens because they barely have any fish, or like one person brought up to me, some of them have no fish at all in them. So these tanks do not have to deal with the insults that we have with fish, because whenever you add food in the aquarium, the fish eat it and it turns into ammonia. There are some fish that create urine, such as sharks, rays and sharks. They create urine, but when our fish eat a particular food item, it turns into ammonia. Okay, they expel ammonia. And some people will make the comment, well, you know, you have bacteria and it'll break down things. Well, there's a little experiment that everybody can do. Take some food, put it at the bottom of your tank, and see how long it takes for that food to disintegrate. Take a leaf, put a leaf in your tank, see how long it takes that leaf to disintegrate. It takes an awful long time. Food does not break down as fast as we would think. That's why whenever you're feeding fish and they don't get 100% of the food sits at the bottom. And if you don't get it out of there, you're going to have a problem, because it takes a long time for the bacteria to get on it and start using the organic material that you put in there, and it didn't get eaten. That's why we have catfish. Hopefully the cories will come and eat it hopefully to turn it into ammonia so the bacteria can take care of it. There's some studies with EHEIM on ammonia reduction, how long it takes for so much ammonia added to the tank, how long the bacteria would take to break it down. Maybe that's something you may want to look at. But anyhow, so I do dwell on that. But like my particular tank, I've been testing it. If you watch my last video, the testing has been done for your phosphates. And let's say on 12/28, the phosphates were 0.91. 12/29, the phosphates were 0.9. And today, the phosphates were 0.84. And as you can see just from me testing since I did the video, that phosphates do fluctuate a little bit depending on how much food I guess you had, but they're all pretty low, and I'll just keep watching and give you a heads up on the phosphates. But one person made mention to me about he complained that I make people feel dumb if they don't do tests the way I do them. And I've never insinuated that anybody is dumb or stupid or anything else. When I did my second test, I redid it because people complained that I didn't do the test correctly and I maybe got a false reading when I did my nitrate. So I redid that video to show people in real time, okay, here's the nitrate test kit. I didn't say people were stupid or anything else if they didn't do it my way. I just followed the directions that's on the instructions. This particular individual, he knows who he is. I'm just going to delete him every time he makes a comment. So don't even waste your time making a comment on my YouTube. You're just going to get deleted. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He's one of these know-it-alls. Apparently he has a bone to pick. And this is what happens. And I see other YouTube video people complain about the same thing. These people come on their YouTube channel. I've watched some of these YouTube channels. The people seem to be very nice. Yet you come with these people who just become arrogant with them. And they've had to make comments that if you do that, we're just going to delete your comments. And I'm going to do the same thing. If you're going to get arrogant in your comments or anything, I'm just going to delete you. If you want to have a discussion, a scientific discussion or something like that, that's fine. If you're going to get arrogant, you're just deleted. I don't care. I'm not getting paid for this. So I can care less how many comments I have. Or, you know, if I get a ton of thumbs up or thumbs down. This is to educate individuals what us scientists know or what's being taught in universities. That's what I always tell people. I'm only showing you what's been taught in university. If you don't like it, you know, then rewrite the books. You know, I must have thousands of books in my library on fish and bacteria and everything else. Thousands in my library just at home alone. Most hobbyists, I notice, they maybe have 2-3 books. That's, you know, I've seen that a lot with pond people. They barely had any books at all. I have thousands of books, all kinds of books on ichthyology, all kinds of books on every fish name, every fish that's out there. I must have a book on every one that exists out there where I could look it up in case I need to relook up a fish, because there's 40,000 different fish out there that you have to remember, and it's too much to remember. But anyway, I just wanted to tell you that. I wanted to read what someone has. I get a lot of comments. I seen at the end of this video, I'm going to show you some different materials you could use in place of kitty litter. Remember, all these materials, all these clay materials I'm going to show you at the end of this video, I've already used and tested over 32 years ago. And it doesn't matter whether you use kitty litter or whether you use oil dry or whether you use what they call absorb in dry. They all act the same way. And you can buy them, and I'm going to show you pictures of them, of what they look like. So if you can't get kitty litter, fine, buy one of these products. Also, I got an email from a woman that said she went to Walmart. Their kitty litter has been changed. I said that in my video when I did the biocenosis clarification basket. The kitty litter has been changed. The formula isn't quite the same. And Walmart admitted to her, yes, we got a different vendor. And yes, the kitty litter is different. It is not the same as it was. So they admitted to her, and I just told her, well, then go with a different product that will work just as well. The reason I chose kitty litter over some of these other products, it was just cheaper. Remember, 32 years ago, you use Safety Zorb oil dryer or anything. These cost more than a $2.50 bag of kitty litter. And that's the reason I chose kitty litter, because it was cheaper and everybody's trying to save money. So that was all I was trying to do. Give the hobbyists the cheapest route to go. It seems today it's harder to get the kitty litter. Fine. Then you're going to have to go with some of these products. You'll see there's price tags on them, and they are at least, some of them are 2 to 3 times more than what kitty litter would cost you. But since Walmart is now unreliable on their kind of kitty litter that they're using, and I can understand where people have complained to me that they used kitty litter in their plenum and it was a big mess. Well, yeah, if they bought the Walmart brand, it's been changed. It's not the baked kitty litter that Walmart used to, because I have an old bag of kitty litter and it says right on there, it's been baked and dried and it has very little dust. They don't have that kitty litter anymore. Apparently, they admit they changed their vendors. Just like I said in my last video, they did. Anyhow, to get down to nitrogen and phosphates, someone kind of complained why I constantly talk about nitrate and phosphate, because of the fact of these seem to be two of the problem childs in aquarium that seem to cause the most problem. pH is not too much of a problem. People don't really have a hard time. You can go to any aquarium store and they'll tell you what to do if you have low pH. That doesn't seem to be much of a problem. Ammonia, well, if you're going to build a BCB, your ammonia problems are done. Okay, so I mean, this is how the system works. I don't talk about those problems because they're non-existent once you build an anoxic filter and start using a biocenosis clarification baskets. These problems will subside because you're going to start becoming a little more dependent upon your BCB, and you're going to start getting rid of your other filter mediums that are in there. You're not going to need them. And that's why on my aquarium, that's basically what I use. Now, this does not mean that if you like to use carbon, you could still use it. If you like to use a filter that absorbs phosphates, by all means use it. It doesn't mean you don't have to use these products, but you're going to use products that now will do a better benefit for you in your canister or whatever than using sintered glass materials or noodles or bio balls or any of those materials. You're going to soon learn you don't need them. They're not a must anymore like you had in your old aquarium. Even your sump is basically going to have BCBs in it, and you won't need all the rest of the stuff. You'll need a nice pre-filter and use the BCB, and that's it. You're not going to need it. But this doesn't mean that if you want to use something that helps you with your phosphates, that you can't add it. It doesn't mean that. Of course you can add it. There's other cloth filters that people may want to use, like let's say Boyd's, Dick Boyd's. You want to use Dick Boyd's? Fine, you can still use it. It's just a plus. But you don't have to use all the other filter mediums that you're using. And I've been reading on some of these planted aquarium sites and stuff like that they use like Safety Zorb, and they claim, oh, it's better than fluoride and stuff like this. Well, this is old technology. I've been saying this for over 32 years. Back in the 80s when I did my test on all these different clay materials, that we found out, myself and a chemist that worked with me, that we found out about all these materials and how they worked. So to me, this is nothing new, and I'm finding out that for some people, this is new stuff. And why hasn't it gotten out there? Well, it's self-explanatory, right? You're going out buying a $9 bag of safety Zorb or oil dry or kitty litter for $2.50 or $4, and somebody's selling you a $30 bag of substrate. And let's say you have a big tank and you're going to need 2 or 3 of these bags. And I've always told people, you can add the kitty litter or safety Zorb or something and then put a substrate over that if you want. And I'm going to go through that when I get my tank. I'm going to show you exactly how cosmetically you can make your tank look the way you want it to look. Not have to put up with, you know what, I don't like the way, safety Zorb looks. I like the black substrate or whatever. I'm going to show you how to do that. When I get the tank I haven't heard from the manufacturer yet. Well, so what I wanted to talk to you about is, one person made a comment, and so I thought I would explain to you dissimilatory denitrification and assimilatory denitrification. They're both different denitrification processes. When denitrification first came out and people started getting involved in it, they used a fructose, which is nothing but a fruit sugar. And what they did was they would make a pre-membrane bag, and they would fill it full of this sugar, and it would leach out very slowly. And then they would have a second chamber, which would have what is called DLS material in it, and it had gaps in it, and slowly the water would be dripped into that chamber, and the water would, from another chamber that had the fructose in it, would go in there, and supposedly that would make a condition where your nitrates would be taken care of in your saltwater aquarium. Then, shortly after that, a company called Sarah, and Sarah made a filter called Sarah Titan, and they made a biodenitrator, and some people may even remember those. And it was a biodenitrator that connected up to your Sarah Titan filter, and you had a pill, and you would add that to this, and that would take care of your nitrates. And this is an Italian company, and that would create the same conditions as I just explained with the DLS material. The problem with all these, of course, when you start adding sugars to your aquarium, it's very hard to keep things at a constant, because I remember helping breeders in saltwater aquarium, and we would try that, but they couldn't get the amount of flow of water coming into the chamber correct. And when they would open it up, it smelled like hydrogen sulfide. The water was going too slow. And it really is still here today, but it's a hassle because people don't like using it, because it really does take a lot of fidgeting trying to get those kind of particular filters, like that biodenitrator stuff, to work absolutely correctly. Then they made another product called Nitrix, I think it was. It was like a rubberized material. I tried that. It didn't work either. This is what brought me on to going with anoxic conditions. And this is what I'm going to explain to you, what these different dissimilatory denitrification. Let's see. That is something that happens naturally. And that's what I did a lot of my research on, because I figured we got to get this nut cracked. We got to get it done so it becomes simple and easy for the hobbyist. But it was, thankfully, it was because of the government that I had to do a lot of research with clay material, because they were having a problem with a particular lake going bad, and they wanted to know why. So me and this chemist start looking into it, and we found out it's because they removed the clay. Then we had to find out what the clay impacted this particular lake, and then we'd start doing experiments with different kinds of clay. And that's how we kind of came up with this whole thing of the anoxic filter, anoxic conditions. So thinking they did something good by removing the clay out of the lake, they actually ruined the lake, and it started deteriorating because the clay was actually helping keeping conditions operable in the lake. And sometimes these accidents do happen, right? Does everybody remember the zebra mussel that everybody bitched about? And oh, these are terrible. They're doing it. But they actually cleaned the lakes up, Lake Superior and everything. They actually helped clean the lakes up, they found out. These mussels did. But everybody hated them. If you remember, they're a big thing. Oh, zebra mussels, they're terrible. Well, they would go and clog up factories. So here's something that happened that really helped clean up a lake because they were filter feeders, zebra mussels are. And that's exactly what they do. They filter out the water, and they actually cleaned up the lakes that man had polluted. But in this case, I'm going off on a tangent here, sorry about that. In this case, there's two different kinds of denitrification. And what happened a long time ago is hobbyists believed that assimilatory denitrification was the correct denitrification to have. And actually, it was the incorrect denitrification to have. But they thought it was. And even to this day, hobbyists believe that assimilatory denitrification is the correct denitrification to have. I will try to explain to you. We found out it is not, and it causes other problems. And denitrification is the dissimilative reduction of a nitrate, NO3 minus, to nitrogen gas, which is N2, through the production of nitrite, which is NO2 minus, and gases nitric oxide and nitrous oxide, intermediates. Okay, that's the assimilatory denitrification that is in my book. That is the definition I give. Dissimilatory denitrification happens in anoxic conditions with facultative bacteria. This process is performed by heterotrophic bacteria under anoxic condition and uses nitrates as a thermal electron acceptor in the presence of carbon and energy source. An electron donor is required as a carbon and energy source to fuel the denitrification process. Dissolve organic carbon, DOC. This is how the correct denitrification process works. Turns it into N2 and is gassed off. And this is something that is a little newer to the hobbyists, understanding this, than it was assimilatory denitrification, which everybody thought was the correct way to do it. That is not. It is the way the anoxic filter works using heterotrophic, facultative, anaerobic bacteria. It's a long name. Why does it hold the name anaerobic? Well, you have this bacteria in your mouth. This exact bacteria is in your mouth right now, okay? Anybody who's a nurse or anything like that who's taken, went to like a pre-med school or anything, nurses, they all know that. Now, what that means, anaerobic, why did it get classified as anaerobic? Because it has the ability to facilitate either in oxygen or non-oxygen conditions and do the same amount of work, okay? And that's why they called it anaerobic, because it's able to live in oxygen conditions, low oxygen conditions, okay, not high, low. And this is between 2 parts per million all the way down to 0.5 parts per million. That's pretty low oxygen. When oxygen levels get that low, the nitrous, at least the autotrophic bacteria that we're doing doesn't work anymore. It's too low. The oxygen levels are way too low, okay? These bacteria take over, and they do all the work for you. So when one bacteria can't exist anymore, another bacteria is right there to take over for you and to facilitate everything that needs to be done to your aquarium. And that's what made the Anoxic filter so successful in koi ponds, because it was able to do everything. Plus you have your normal bacteria doing it. Now, Assimilatory denitrification, 90% of the bacteria in our filters and our aquariums are heterotrophic. But that does not mean that they all have the capability or ability in a reduction process to facilitate nitrates into nitrogen gas. You see, a long time ago we used to think that. Hobbyists did, but it doesn't. Or nitrates into NH3. Okay, NH3, as you know, is ammonia. Some heterotrophic bacteria can take nitrates and in a reduction process reduce it into nitrites. So this tricked the hobbyists in believing that when they put sand at the bottom of their aquarium and oxygen couldn't get to it, they would say, see, I have no nitrates. But this heterotrophic bacteria, there are certain heterotrophic bacteria that will literally take the nitrates and turn it into nitrites. Well, that's bad. Nitrates are more deadlier than nitrates. They didn't know that at the time. All they did was see that I have no nitrates. But now you're adding nitrites to the whole situation. And in a reduction process, reduce it into nitrites and no further. So that's all they would do. These specific bacteria, they take nitrates, convert it into nitrites, and no further. They're just making more nitrites. Why other bacteria can take the nitrites and further reduce it into ammonia, NH3. This is why people got messed up. They would say, if I put my substrate directly on the bottom of an aquarium and I make it 2 or 3 inches thick and I put plants, I'm safe. But the Germans tried to explain to everybody, no, you can't do this. You've got to have water moving in and out of the substrate. Somehow, it's got to move. And through convection only, where the roots of the plant are going to bring water into the substrate, and I proved this in class, I proved this to students and everything, it doesn't work quite the way you would think it should work. Now, you'll see blackening of the aquarium. So the Germans went with heating cables to move water in and out very slowly out of the substrate. So you wouldn't get assimilatory denitrification. Okay, that's why they did it. Because plants alone can only do so much. Try to understand it. They can only do so much. They can even only do so much in a pond. That's why these BCB baskets, you could plant them up with plants. And like I said, in my pond, I only had four baskets with plants. The rest of the baskets had no plants at all. Because plants can only do so much because of the fact they really need to be growing good. And as you start adding more fish load, you start ending up with a problem. Therefore, like Amano found out, you have to add CO2 and fertilizers so your plants work harder to keep your aquarium cleaner. Makes sense, right? If your plants aren't working very hard and you start adding more and more fish, you're going to start having a problem with algae and everything else because your plants are only working so hard. They can only work so hard without that CO2. And though people will say, here I have a plant aquarium with no CO2, even some of the people that I talked to on the phone said, you notice some of them don't even have a fish in it. Well, you have a water garden. As people start adding the fish, that's where the problems start becoming prevalent with a lot of planted aquariums. The more fish you add, the more problems you're going to start having. So you got to understand that. There's some way water has to move in and out of the substrate because the intersection of topography has been closed off with the bottom of the aquarium glass. Understand that. Once you close it off, water doesn't move like you want it to. And don't forget, plants don't move water 24/7. They move water when they're photosynthesizing, moving water. But if they're not working as efficient as they should be, you're not moving the water through the substrate like you should be. So therefore, it would take a lot of plants to do the job you want it to do. Once again, you end up with the bad problem of nitrates, phosphates, start ending up with algae problems, beard algae, hair algae, string algae, spot algae doesn't become much of a problem at all, and that's only going to be created if you're out of balance and you're using high intensity light. Otherwise, it doesn't really become a problem like some think. It grows on your glass. Spot algae is more of a silicon algae. In other words, it will grow on your glass because your glass is silica. It's made out of, sand. It's silica. So it will cling on it. There's other algae that love silica. But anyhow, so this is something that people thought with assimilatory denitrification is that it would get rid of their nitrates. But see, it was only creating another problem, ammonia. And hopefully your plants can take the ammonia. But then, don't forget, the ammonia, if it's not used, it's going to be attacked by bacteria to break it back down into nitrites and then break it back down to nitrates. And this cycle continues, you see. It constantly is continuing, and therefore you are making a food source for your plants, but you're also making a food source for your algae. Okay, and that's one thing we all don't want. We don't want our tank just full of algae. Okay, however, most reductant heterotrophic bacteria are in the anaerobic class of bacteria and live in an anaerobic zone of a filter, and they have the capability to reduce nitrates into ammonia and no further, tricking the hobbyists in believing that they now have a denitrogen filter or a reduction filter with the capabilities of making N2, but this is not true. Ammonia is a lot more toxic to our animals than nitrates, so assimilatory denitrification or any bacteria that have reduction capabilities should be avoided if at all possible. By knowing what you're inoculating in your aquarium up front. Well, this I wrote this because now we get into microbiology. And some people will use chemicals or use additives in their aquarium, and they don't understand what's in those additives. And you're getting into, now you're going to start getting into microbiology, and I'm not going to get into that because otherwise you start losing people. Obligated anaerobic heterotrophic bacteria that die in the presence of oxygen have the ability to do assimilatory denitrification and still fall under the class of heterotrophic bacteria and use anaerobic fermentative reaction pathways. Then you also have the aerotolerant bacteria that do not require oxygen and metabolize their energy anaerobically. They will not die in the presence of oxygen and fall under heterotrophic bacteria. So these are the bacteria that fall under anoxic conditions. The autotrophic bacteria like microaerophile bacteria used in the breaking down of inorganic compounds like in the nitrogen cycle only makes another byproduct that either heterotrophic bacteria can use as a food source or chemotrophic bacteria use as a food source using inorganic or organic compounds as its energy source. The autotrophic bacterium that is used in the nitrogen cycle, nitrobacteria, do not have the capabilities to facilitate nitrates into N2. That takes a specialized bacteria to do this, and they fall into the respiratory heterotrophic or facultative anaerobic class of bacteria, not the nitrobacteria class of bacteria. Facultative anaerobes can generate fermentation and behave as respiratory heterotrophs and live in anoxic zones of your BCB. They make better use of phosphorus and only trace amounts of phosphates, unlike nitrobacteria. Okay? This is why people have noticed when they use a BCB how things change, because the bacteria is making better use of things than their nitrobacteria is. I know this is a lot to wrap around your head, and I apologize for that, but it is a lot to know. It wasn't easy making the right kind of conditions, but you can make the right kind of conditions for these facultative bacteria in a BCB. It gets real complicated. I just made it real simple for you. It starts getting a lot more complicated than what I have just said here. And I hope everybody kind of understands that what is going on to help you break down your insults that are coming into your aquarium and what is really happening. It's the same thing in a pond. And what is really happening. A lot of people had the misconception that assimilatory denitrification took away their nitrates, and really it was just making a byproduct that became worse than the nitrates themselves. Okay? It almost reminds you of like this pandemic. Like they said, you're closing down everything. Now, you're hurting everybody worse now than what the pandemic would be doing. People are losing their jobs. They can't stay open. You can't do that. You got to keep things open, but try to keep things under control at the same time. And that's what you're doing here. You got to keep things under control. You can't be making another byproduct, okay? Because that byproduct that you're making, if your higher order plants are not really photosynthesizing at 100%, and they're only photosynthesizing, let's say, at 25%, the first thing that's going to come into your tank is algae, because they don't need it. They don't need anything almost to exist. And this is what makes people mad, because they begin to get more and more algae. Of course, if you look at the Planet aquarium tanks, they don't have this problem, right? Because they don't hardly have any fish. And they're not feeding, they're sparingly feeding their fish. Almost like a saltwater that used to happen a long time ago. You barely fed the fish. Well, I try to appeal to the people who would like to have fish. I want to have fish. I'll put a few plants in, but I deal with people, they like stones, they like rocks, they like branches in their aquarium. They're not really concerned a lot about plants. They may put a few in for cosmetic purposes. Now, how do you deal with those tanks, right? How do you deal with them? So they can thrive and then take care of delicate fish so they thrive. Because some of the fish that we buy is very expensive. Anyhow, I want to wrap this up. I'm showing you some pictures here of Safety Zorb, some of the products you can use. In fact, one of a hobbyist sent me their laterite, where you can get it. I'm putting that up there if you would like to get some of that. And you will see another hobbyist tank here. And in his tank, he shows me he put a little bitty BCB basket in. He made it out of a bag. And you can see a before and after. He also added a couple angels. And he said within a day or two, you'll see the before and after of his tank. We don't know if it's the basket that did it, or we're not 100% if the angels were picking on the algae and ate it all up. but I'm going to show you a picture of it. I don't make any claims or anything. Anyhow, until next time, this is Dr. Novak. I hope you enjoyed the video. And by the way, if you're going to make a snobbish comment, I'm just going to erase it. That's all. No one's going to hear your comment, so just keep it to yourself if it's going to be a comment that is going to insult or anything else. I'm just going to get rid of it. So don't even waste your time. Just keep it to yourself. Thank you very much for watching.